Hello, this is Robbie Mitchell here from Head in the Cloud Development. Today I'm going to walk you through setting up the NetSuite SDF plugin in WebStorm running on Linux. And then we're going to walk through coding a short example script together that sets an accumulated total sales value on customer records. This video is being recorded in January 2024 on NetSuite version 2023.2. So if you're still interested, more detailed goals of this video are to walk you through setting up the SDF plugin in WebStorm on Linux, to demonstrate using TypeScript in an SDF project, and in our example, we're going to highlight using the n/query module to run a SuiteQL query that gets the total sales amount for a customer. The end result is we'll have a scheduled script that sets the total sales value on any customers who had sales today. This video is intended for NetSuite developers and administrators. You should have the administrator role in NetSuite to do everything I cover here. You should be at least familiar with JavaScript and basic web technologies to keep up, and I assume that you've at least looked at the SuiteScript API before. So let's get started. There's a few things we need to download here. First is WebStorm, second is Node.js, and third, I've created a repository that has the files for what we're doing here. You can download it if you want, or you can start from scratch. It's up to you. So for my environment, I'm booting up my Ubuntu 22.04 virtual machine here. I'm on an Apple processor, so I've got the ARM64 version of it. So for installing WebStorm, let me just copy this URL. If you're on Mac or Windows, then it's really easy. You can just go to this page and download it. Here on Linux, it's a little bit more tricky. One thing you can normally do is actually get this Toolbox app for Linux. That makes updating the app as you go forward quite a bit easier. Except for me, I'm running this as a virtual machine on an Apple Silicon processor, and they don't actually have a version of the Toolbox for ARM yet. So I'm just going to have to download and install WebStorm directly here. So the file is 600 megabytes, so this will take just a minute. Okay, the download is finished, so let's see if I can get this installed. I'm just going to extract it right to my downloads folder. And to actually start the app, I'm sure there's a way to set up a shortcut, but I'm not quite sure how. I'm really not an expert in Linux, to be honest. But what we can do is just go into the folder and we can execute this WebStorm shell file from here. That starts up WebStorm. See the user agreement here. Confirm and hit continue. Sure. I'm just going to start this as a trial. Okay, so WebStorm is up and running. Let's leave this here. We'll come back to it shortly. So the second thing we need to install is Node.js. We can get this from nodejs.org. Again, if you're on Mac or Windows, just download it here. Go for the long-term support version. Here it's version 20. On Ubuntu, I think it's actually easier to install with the built-in package manager. I'm going to open a new terminal window, and I can do sudo apt install Node.js. Okay, so that's installed. So we got Node installed. Then we need to install npm next. So to do that, we run sudo apt install npm. Now there's just one problem. This has installed a really old version of Node. To update Node, we need to install a tool called N that we can use to update Node easily. So installing it without sudo failed, so let me try sudo npm install gn. Okay, so now if I run sudo nstable. So now it's updating our node from version 12 to version 20, which is the most recent long-term support version. So that's what we want. So while that's installing, our next step is going to be to install the SDF plugin in WebStorm. To do this, we need to get the plugin repository URL from NetSuite. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my NetSuite account. So if we go to the NetSuite help menu, and let's type in adding Suite Cloud IDE plug into WebStorm. Okay, here are the repositories. Let's use the latest version here. I'm going to copy this. And then in WebStorm, let's go to Plugins and click on this little setup icon, Manage Plugin Repositories, Add, paste in the NetSuite URL, click OK, then let's go to the Marketplace, type in NetSuite, and here it is, so let's install this one. And again, you can either download the repository I've set up, or if you want to create a new project, I think we just need to restart WebStorm to get the NetSuite options to show up here, so let's do that. Oh, and my node install finished, by the way, so now if I do node v, I think I need to restart the terminal too. Let's just go ahead and do that. Yeah, so now node v shows version 20. And I'll go back to my WebStorm folder and start that again. Now if I do new project, we've got our NetSuite account customization project here. So you can do this, but since there are a few setup files involved, I'm going to actually download the repository that I created. So let's do that. So this is a public repository, so anybody can download this. And we've got a few others if you want to check them out. I'm just going to download this as a zip file. And we'll extract it into our Documents folder. And then in WebStorm, we can now open that project. And whether you're doing this manually or looking at what I provided here, let's start with the package.json file. When using Node.js, a package.json file tells the Node package manager which packages and versions need to be installed. So this file is how we tell it to load our Head in the Cloud NetSuite Types module and TypeScript. So once you have this in place, go ahead and run the npm install command to install these modules. Next, let's take a look at tsconfig.json. This file controls how TypeScript files are handled. Here you'll see the ES 2021 target. This is the version of JavaScript that we're compiling to. The important thing here is actually the folders down here. What this says is to compile any TypeScript files in this folder and to put them into the HITC folder within the SuiteScripts folder of the file cabinet. You'll see that here. And just to give you a quick preview, this is what the script is going to look like when it's finished. It's only 30 lines long, so don't be too afraid. But let's get into it. The next step here is to authenticate to NetSuite to connect this project to our account. So first, let's make sure we are logged into NetSuite in our primary browser. And then if we right-click on the project here, go to the NetSuite menu, go to NetSuite Settings, expand this, let's go to Account Management and click the little plus icon. We'll do browser-based authentication. So I'm going to allow the project to connect. So this kicks us out of our login, so we'll have to log in again. And back in WebStorm, we should see that account credentials have been added. So we can go to the project settings and let's set our account as the default account for this project, then click OK. Okay, so now our compiler is all set up and we can actually get to developing. First, let's talk about the goal again for a minute. Let's look at my test customer, Starbucks. Here we see a total sales field. Let me show you the setup of this custom field for a minute. I'm going to go to Customization, List Records and Fields, Entity Fields, and here's this field. So what I want to highlight here is that this is a stored field. And now there are pros and cons to doing it this way, and I'll briefly explain them here. The advantage of having the value stored is it makes it a lot easier to access directly via searches and reports. In other words, with this, I can very easily make a report of all my customers that have over $10,000 in sales, for example. The alternative of having it stored like this is to leave it unstored and instead have its value come from a search that dynamically calculates the total sales in real time. That being said, the main disadvantages of having the value stored like this are that it's up to you to keep the value up to date with a script or a workflow, and you'll see the value changing quite a bit in the system notes, which can be a bit of clutter. For this example scenario, we're assuming that's all okay, and we are proceeding with having it a stored value. So the way we're going to tackle this is to create a scheduled script that runs once a day and update this total sales value for any customers who have had a sale that day. We're going to do this using the nQuery module. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, let's get to it. So I'm obviously giving you a completed version of this script here, but let's walk through creating it. The first step is to create the script object itself. To do that, we can right-click on the Objects folder and do New Custom Object. Then we can choose Script Scheduled. And here we can give it an ID. Just to be different from the first one, I'll do Customer Total Sales. Now this is nice, but I don't think this default function gets used anymore, so I'm going to delete that. And for our script name, let's set it to Set Customer Total Sales Scheduled. Let's also use that for the title of the deployment. And let's just change the deployment ID to Custom Deploy 1. And next, of course, we'll need to create our script file, so let's do that. Right-click on TypeScripts and do New TypeScript File. Let's call it Set Total Sales SS. And then the way we put this into our XML file is we start with the SuiteScripts folder, HITC, set total sales ss.js. That'll be the compiled JavaScript file. Okay, so here we'll start with our block header comment. The script type and API version tags are mandatory here. And in a scheduled script, our entry point is the execute function. So I'm going to say export function execute. And now the biggest advice I can give you is that when we're doing NetSuite development, it's very important to do things iteratively. In other words, build something in small pieces, test as you go, and keep it working. It's much easier for you to debug a problem if you've only changed one thing, whereas it's very difficult to debug a problem if you write a huge, massive script without testing as you go. So that being said, let's start very simple and just start with an execution log for running our first test with. So I'm importing the log module, and let's just say log.debug, execute. We'll include a timestamp here. We'll say execution finished at new date. So we still have a green check mark, so nothing is wrong yet. So to compile this, we just need to click on the terminal here and run tsc. And that should generate the JavaScript version of the file here. Now to deploy this, we can right-click on the project, go to NetSuite and deploy. And when you first deploy this, you might see an error about needing to add server-side scripting to your manifest file. If you haven't done that, that's this line here. And the way we got this here was to right-click on the project and do NetSuite add dependency references to manifest. But if you're using my downloaded version, then we already have this here. So the project deployed successfully. Let's take a look at it in NetSuite. Go to Scripting Scripts. And here's our new script. Let's go to the deployment. I'm going to edit the deployment and just click Save and Execute. Okay, that only took a couple of seconds to run. And here's our execution log. So great, we haven't broken anything yet. Now before we jump back into the code, let's talk about the query that we're going to run. Breaking our task down, our first goal is going to be to find all the customers who had a sale today. And to test the query for this, we're going to use this free SuiteQL Suitelet that Tim Dietrich has so graciously provided us with. This bundle is free for anyone to use. we can come here and enter any query to test. So first, we need to define what we mean by sales. Many companies define sales as the sum of invoices, cash sales, and credit memos. But we're going to make it even simpler than that. We're just going to consider sales orders for this example. And to find sales orders from today, we need to use the relative date range enumeration, which you can learn about here in NetSuite's documentation. It's basically the way we do things like, say, today and yesterday, like you do in saved searches in a query. And I'll show you how it works, of course. So for our query, we're going to start with this. I'm saying select entity from the transaction table where tran date equals today. And you have to say the start of this range, even though it's a single day range, and type equals sales order. So if I run this, I don't get any because there haven't been any sales yet today. Let's fix that. Let's just create a quick sales order here. I'm just going to create a very simple test sales order here. Let's save this. Now if I run my query again, we do get one result. So that works great. And let me show you one more advanced layer of testing here. We can actually do this kind of query from our browser console as well. And the advantage to doing it here is you see how the response will look in your code. So first, enter this line into your console, require end query. Second, enter in var query equals require end query. And now we can do queries like this. So this is kind of the format of calling the run SuiteQL function. And I'm just going to copy and paste in the query that I did a second ago between these quotes. And when we do this, we see we get an array back for our result set, and we get our one object here with entity 1649. So that's pretty much how we'll handle it in the code. So let's go back to WebStorm and do this there. So first, of course, we need to import the query module. Then let's copy and paste this query we just did. Storing the results in a variable called results. We can break this down just to make it a bit more readable. And after we do a query, it's usually a good idea to do some sort of logging. So let's log what our result set looks like here. And actually, to be more specific, because we're going to do another query shortly, let's call this customer results. Now you can see that TypeScript infers that this is a query result map array, but let's give it something more specific. We know from the query that we're actually just going to get an entity back, and that's going to be a number. So we can say it's an object array with entity as a number. But TypeScript doesn't like that. It says it doesn't match. So what we do to get around that is here we just say as any at the end of the line. Okay, great. So now we have the customers who had a sales order today. So we need to do another query to get their total sales. To do this, let's iterate through these results and gather up our customer IDs into an array. Now we need to do another query to get the total sales for all these customers. Let's try it in our browser first. So we're going to do a select entity and the sum of the 4 in total as total from the transaction table, where the entity is in our array of customers. Here it's just 1649. And type is sales order. We're going to group by entity. So if I run this, we get our sales total for our test customer Starbucks. Okay, so let's do our query now. So here we'll say const results equals query.run SuiteQL. Query is basically this. We'll handle this 1649 in just a sec. Here we'll say dot as mapped results as any. Now the type here is going to be an array of objects, where again we have entity as a number and we have total as a number. And the way we handle this ID here is we're going to take our array and join it by a comma, because the in operator here really wants a parentheses list of IDs joined by commas. Then of course we'll log what that result looks like. And finally, we can just loop through these results and update each customer record. And for that, of course, we need the record module. The value we're updating is cust entity total sales, which I have included as part of this project. Okay, now let's upload and test this. So we'll compile it again. Uh-oh, I got an error here. What doesn't it like? Oh, I misspelled stringify. Okay, let's compile again. And I'll mention that when you're uploading just a single file, you can right-click on the JavaScript file and go to NetSuite, upload file to account. And that's just a little bit easier than uploading the whole project again when just one file needs to be uploaded. Okay, so that's worked. So let's run our script again. Let's take a look at the execution logs. Uh-oh, I must have done something wrong. It looks like it didn't like my second query here. Why would that be? Ah, right. This warning tells me I didn't do this right. I need to do $ curly braces and put customer IDs.join in that, because it gets a little bit confusing when you're doing TypeScript operations within a query, but this should do it. So I'll compile that again, upload that again. Okay, let's go back to Firefox and let's run it again. Okay, so there's our sales result query. We're updating the customer. Check the status page. Okay, it's definitely complete. So if I go back and take a look at my customer, we should be seeing 10.664.95, and there it is. And so now that we have this working, you might consider setting it to be on a schedule and running daily, probably at the end of the day, maybe around 11 p.m. to catch all of the sales from that day. And the last thing I'll mention here is that I mentioned that sales can be defined differently. This was a simple example where we only looked at sales orders, but in my done example here that I give you with the repository, you'll notice that I did actually do the full example of cash sales, invoices, and credit memos. So that's just slightly more in-depth, but it might be more realistic for your scenario at your company. So use that if you see fit. And that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed this NetSuite scripting tutorial. Feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you at Suite World. Thank you for watching.